this is the most powerful rocket ever launched, and what's it going to be like on the ground when they light this candle, and what's the turnout like? I'm guessing if you turn the camera left or right, you'd see reporters from all over the world.
I've never seen so many press and journalists gathered in one place anyway, generally speaking, but certainly for the launches that I've attended here at Kennedy Space Center, you know, it is in the high hundreds, if not, you know, thousands. One point of distinction about what you said, if SLS goes tonight, it will be the most powerful human-rated launch system to ever leave Earth. 8.8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. I say that because, of course, on paper, SpaceX's Starship is capable of more than double that. But SpaceX is nowhere near to putting humans atop a Starship. And so that's the main point, that this is about humans, a real crew, not just going back to the moon for the first time since in more than 50 years, but it's aboard a system that NASA's been very committed to and has only flown once before.
Really interesting. And just lastly, and I'm looking forward so much to your coverage this evening, I remember being at Cape Canaveral for the end of Shuttle. The end of the Shuttle program was a very dark time for the community, the space community, not only working on the base, but all the ancillary businesses that make up that whole part of Florida along the Space Coast, Cocoa Beach. What's the feeling today? Are we back?
Yeah, I mean, this, you know, from the public's perspective, this is sold out. The traffic, the hotels are booked out, the restaurants are filled out. You know, it's a big moment for Americans. Real quick stat that I think you'll appreciate from the shuttle days. On the bottom of SLS are 4
listening to with Iran calling it fake or false news that the president saying that they were willing to have a ceasefire. Eric, thank you for jumping in. It's great to see you. Eric Wiener on another big day on the markets. We're not pulling back at all on these headlines. S&P 500 up over 1% now. In crude oil, as we mentioned, WTI, West Texas Intermediate sitting right at $100. $100 down 1%. Brent down 2% at $102 a barrel. We're going to have a lot to talk about with our panel today. Certainly glad that they're both with us. Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis will be with us in just a couple of moments as we consider the speech tonight, what the president will say, and we're going to have more information on this preview that's coming out of the White House right now. Our team is assembled and ready to cover this in prime time, and I'll be with you for the duration, so I hope you are too. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. This is Bloomberg.
Powered by more than 3,000 journalists and analysts in over 100 bureaus around the world. This is the district's only 24-hour source for breaking business news and market-moving headlines. Bloomberg 99.1. Now, a global news update.
President Trump is sitting in on today's Supreme Court hearing over birthright citizenship. He arrived at the courthouse this morning, making him the first sitting president to attend oral arguments at the Supreme Court. He signed an executive order on his first day back in office to end birthright citizenship for children born to parents in the U.S. illegally or temporarily. Opponents to Trump's plan have argued that goes against the Constitution's 14th Amendment. And President Trump will address the nation tonight. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said on X that the address, set for 9 p.m. Eastern, will provide an important update on Iran. Trump spoke yesterday, saying that he thought the war could end in 2 to 3 weeks. The president said Iran has been decimated and can no longer threaten the U.S. with the promise of a nuclear weapon. The president has reportedly been considering a deployment of American troops on Iranian ground. Iran, meantime, is threatening to strike U.S. companies in the Middle East and warn employees of those operations to leave their workplaces tonight. I'm Chris Karaji.
Hi, I'm Christina Ruffini, inviting you to join us for Bloomberg This Weekend. Catch the show Saturdays and Sundays starting at 7 a.m. Make Bloomberg #1 on that weekend to-do list. Watch and listen on Bloomberg Radio, TV, and the Bloomberg Business app.
They told us to expect change. They warned us about the transition. But honestly, they forgot the best part. This is the chapter where we finally focus on us. LifeMD delivers expert menopause and midlife care right from your home. From hormone health to holistic wellness, LifeMD helps you feel your best for the best years of your life. LifeMD, it's just getting good. Visit lifemd.com/goodlife.
Make this Mother's Day worth remembering. Charles Schwartz & Son has been buying and selling the finest gold and jewelry in the Washington, D.C. area since 1888. Make sure to stop by one of our 2 locations to shop our unique vintage and estate collection. Our 2 convenient locations are located downtown Washington, D.C. at the iconic Willard Hotel or at our Chevy Chase, Maryland location. Visit charlesschwartz.com or call 202-363-5432. Hello, I'm Michelle Hussein. On my new podcast, I speak to people like Mark Carney,
It's not a transition, it's a rupture. You have to act big, you have to act bold.
Salman Rushdie.
Right back into the family is screwed.
Every weekend, you can count on one essential conversation to help make sense of the world. Listen and subscribe to The Michelle Hussein Show from Bloomberg Weekend, wherever you get your podcasts.
You certainly ask some interesting questions.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand, and in your podcast feed.
On the latest edition of the Bloomberg Daybreak U.S. Edition podcast, Bloomberg's Jumana Bursechi joined us from Dubai on President Trump's latest timeline to end the war with Iran.
The market's certainly reacting to the comments coming through from President Trump last night, suggesting that there is a time frame after which they would start to wind down their military operations. So he's suggesting 2 to 3 weeks is how much longer they anticipate it's going to take for them to fully achieve these military objectives. He also said that the main objective, which is ensuring that Iran doesn't go on to develop a nuclear weapon, has largely been achieved as well. And I think, one other thing that really stood out from his comments yesterday is there was no linkage whatsoever between their perhaps anticipation that they're going to be winding down military operations in the next few weeks versus a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. And he seemed to suggest that that is going to be or become a broader global issue as opposed to an issue or a term that the U.S. will
officially filed for an IPO, bringing the company closer to delivering its biggest ever listing. According to the draft IPO registration submitted to the SEC, SpaceX, Elon Musk's SpaceX, would seek a valuation in the IPO of more than $1.75 trillion. Recapping, barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude just above $100 a barrel now. The VIX below 24. The S&P up by 1.1%. Lots going on, Joe Matthew. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Well, that is the truth. This is one of those days. I'm glad you're spending it with us here as the president opens the day by making history, marching up to the Supreme Court to attend oral arguments, and we might just hear from him shortly. They're telling reporters to be ready if he wants to speak during his Easter lunch. Easter lunch at the White House today, just one of the stops on the road before a 9 p.m. Eastern address to the nation. We don't have a lot of these from this president. We certainly have not in this second term prime time address, and it's possible he will not be in the Oval Office for the traditional speech behind the resolute desk. The president likes to use different venues around the White House, and we're going to be bringing that to you live here on Bloomberg with some sense of what he might say. This is the market. You heard Charlie. We're tearing again. And at new highs for the session. S&P 500 up over 1%. The NASDAQ up almost 2% here. Certainly more than 1.5%. 365-point advance for the NASDAQ with a lot of good feels on this thing winding down. Oil prices are lower. Even though we don't know what the president is going to say, we need to be honest about this with an official at the White House, a senior administration official talking with Bloomberg News. But the president will give an operational update on Iran tonight, as opposed to a withdrawal announcement, right? He will tout success in achieving goals in Iran. Presumably, the degradation of its military capabilities when it comes to ballistic missiles, and further when it comes to its nuclear capabilities, which of course the president said we obliterated last year. He's talked about this more, though, just recent rhetoric suggesting that we had eliminated the country's nuclear abilities, even though, as far as we understand at least, we have not seized the highly enriched uranium that still exists in Iran. This might be the most important point. The president will reiterate what he said yesterday, a 2 to 3 week timeline for leaving Iran. Nowhere here does that say a reopened Strait of Hormuz. Nowhere does that say troops deployed on the ground, seizing Karg Island, getting our hands on the uranium. Now, this is all on background. The president could say something different this evening, we suppose. We're told he's going to talk for about 20 minutes. Will the market care? We talked to Eric Weiner about this. Is that enough? Does that sound like we're winding it down, or is it good enough to say that we're preparing to wind down and we're not committing troops tonight? It's not for me to decide. Let's assemble our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis are with us. Jeannie is our Democratic analyst and democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Rick Davis, Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital. Rick, what does the market need to hear? I feel like we're having a couple of different conversations here. The American people might have their own questions. The market may have its own hopes. Are we projecting optimism here in the market? Does it make you nervous about the president saying something very different tonight?
Well, Joe, first let me correct you, and I hardly ever do this, but the president, if he speaks from the Oval Office, will be speaking from behind the CNO desk
too. Mick Mulvaney also made that point. You can't leave without reopening the strait. Is that what's about to happen?
Yeah, Joe, now you know how I feel being schooled by Rick Davis, which I get on a daily basis, though. I'm glad you're joining me. It is unbelievably irresponsible for the United States to leave that strait closed. And the president has this idea that we can break it and presumably just walk away. I would be stunned if the markets are open to that idea, because the impact of that economically would be devastating. I suspect there's a couple things. What the president, I think, is going to do is he's going to do what he did yesterday, which is declare victory. He's going to talk about defeating the Iranian Navy. Well, you know, that's a little bit like sending an NFL team into like the nearby high school and saying, whoa, they really got the best of them. That was never a strong Navy. Their powers are asymmetric. That's how they shut down the strait. He's going to talk about decapitating the regime, but of course we had regime change in the wrong direction. We have a more hardline regime in power. So what he's going to talk about is that kind of stuff, victory. But what he needs to talk about is how he is going to step back from this, how he is going to de-escalate without leaving things worse than we found them. And in order to do that, he needs to have that strait open, which is why he spent so much time berating our allies and threatening last night to leave NATO, because he is so frustrated by the allies there who won't take up what he started and finish the job for us.
We've discussed evolving objectives here, Rick and Jeannie, and I find it interesting what we've settled on here in the past, 48 hours. The most recent news cycle has brought this down to a crystallized 4 or 5 points: destroying the ballistic missiles that I mentioned, Rick, annihilating the Navy, Jeannie just referred to, ensuring terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region, and guarantee that Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. When did the strait fall off that list, or was it never on there?
Well, I think you got to separate achieved objectives of this conflict versus the reasons we got into it. I think you can't leave out the fact that the president himself talked about the imminent threat of the Iranian government pursuing a nuclear weapon. Right? That was out there, and it was almost a precondition for the attack. Two, I don't think this administration ever inoculated the public to the idea that the strait might get closed. I don't recall a single instance before the conflict started that they said, and by the way, if we do go to war with Iran, we'll make sure that the Strait of Hormuz stays open. We didn't hear that at all. And so now this is after the fact. We have an economic dislocation with the Strait of Hormuz being shut by Iran, who can do it with very little capacity that they have left, effectively holding the entire world's oil supply, or 20% of it, for ransom. And so this is a ransom demand, in my view, not an accomplishment or a detriment to the negotiations about settling this war.
You know, Jeannie, the president posted this morning, Truth Social, he won't accept the ceasefire, which of course Iran now says was never offered, until the strait is reopened. Do we have to parse the words there? Because that doesn't mean we won't leave before the strait is reopened. It's about whether we actually codify a deal. And react to what Rick said. Is this not what we should be expecting?
You know, CENTCOM warned, the president warned the administration prior to this excursion, as he likes to call it, that they had the ability to close the strait. And the president, based primarily, I guess, on what happened in Venezuela, said, oh no, they'll surrender before that. That has not happened. And you go through the list of those 5 new objectives or renewed objectives, and you have to really think about how many of those have really been met. Have we really dealt with the proxies? No, we have not. We still have the Houthis threatening to close the Red Sea. We haven't decapitated the regime. We haven't destroyed it. This is a regime that is undecapitatable. That's a new word, Joe. You can't decapitate a regime, as far as I know. You can't decapitate a regime because it's not built like a typical totalitarian regime. This is a deeply embedded regime It's not going to be one like North Korea. You take off the head and the whole thing folds. Now we know that. So, you know, you go through the ballistic missiles. They still have that capability. The nuclear program, we are in worse condition today. They have half a ton of unenriched nuclear material sitting there. If we walk away, what happens to that? So even this 5 list of new objectives, pushing aside the strain, we haven't achieved them. And you know, it's hard to know what to make of the president's constantly changing ideas and thoughts that he seems to share with us in real time, be it Truth Social and in his conversations with reporters and elsewhere. Tonight, what I think the president needs to do is tell us, is he going to do something that's going to make the United States look incredibly weak, walk away with the strait closed and de-escalate this thing? Or does he have another path to de-escalation that we don't know about? Or is he going to escalate and use these troops that are sitting there or on their way, thousands of them, to go in and then be sitting ducks in some of these islands and get us into like a Vietnam scenario where you're going to have Iran attacking our troops from the mainland? What do we do then? We slowly go into Iran and try to destroy a country with 93 million people? These are all bad options, and the president should not tonight, which I think he will do, tout about how he is winning and we have won. He should give us a realistic view as to how we get out of this very bad position that he's gotten us into in the Middle East.
I'm asking you guys questions that cannot be answered. We're all kind of asking rhetorical questions here in our conversation, Rick, in our remaining moment. Are you allowing for the possibility that President Trump says, you know, upon my order, troops are now moving into Iran or have already to seize the highly enriched uranium?
Yeah, I don't think you can discount it. Those troops, the Special Forces, the Green Berets, the 82nd Airborne, they're there for a reason. And if they're there, it's easier to use them if they're not. And so it creates the opportunity for the president and his general staff to mobilize at a moment's notice. And if that's the case, then you cannot discount the president making use of this very potent force for the nuclear material, for opening the strait, for many other objectives that they might have in this war.
We've got a lot to learn here yet today. And that speech is several hours from now, 9 p.m. Eastern. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano will stay with us as we move into hour 2 of Balance of Power. We'll welcome our global television audience, and Kaylee Lyons will be here too, so stay with us on Bloomberg. Balance of Power, live from Washington. Make sure to subscribe to the Balance of Power podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Former Vice President Mike Pence will be with us next hour, so stay here and listen anytime at Bloomberg.com.
Now, your 3-day weather forecast on Bloomberg 99.1.
Showers and thunderstorms will be developing. Some of them may produce heavy downpours and gusty winds. It'll be very warm today, 85 to 90. Showers and thunderstorms are possible tonight too. Lows are 60 to 65. Turning partly sunny tomorrow. Chance of shower late today. Not as warm, 70 to 75. Sunny warmer Friday, 80 to 85. I'm Rob Carolyn with your 3-day forecast on Bloomberg 99.1.
The news doesn't stop on the weekends, and now neither do we. Hi, I'm Christina Ruffini.
And I'm David Gura. Join us for the new Bloomberg This Weekend.
Watch and listen for up-to-the-minute headlines, in-depth analysis, big interviews.
And thoughtful conversations about business, lifestyle, people, and culture.
Make us number 1 on that weekend to-do list. Saturdays and Sundays, starting at 7 a.m.
Bloomberg This Weekend. Join us on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. April 29th and 30th, Bloomberg House arrives in Miami at the Formula One Grand Prix. Set against one of the world's most electrifying sporting events, Bloomberg House brings business, investment, and culture together. Powered by Bloomberg journalism, real-time data, and forward-looking conversations. From
people.
Financial advisors, are you looking to add or switch custodians? Are you going independent? Interactive Brokers provides lowest cost trading and turnkey custody solutions for all sized firms. Trade globally from a single unified master account with no ticket charges, no custody fees, no minimums, and no tech, platform, or reporting fees. Plus, IBKR has no advisory team or prop trading book to compete with you for your clients. Switch to the custody solutions that work for you at ibkr.com/RIA.
The news doesn't stop on the weekends, and now neither do we. This is David Dura. Join us on Bloomberg This Weekend. Watch and listen to the news show Saturdays and Sundays starting at 7 a.m. on Bloomberg Radio, TV, and the Bloomberg Business app.
This is WDCH-FM Bowie, Baltimore, Washington. WJZ-FM HD2 Gainesville. Bloomberg 99.1. Programming paid for by Bloomberg. Live from Washington, D.C. This is Balance of Power with Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines.
President Trump prepares to address the nation. Welcome to the Wednesday edition on this 33rd day of the war with Iran, and a commander-in-chief set to update the country on the way forward. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lines in Washington. Kaylee, the markets are feeling very optimistic about what we might hear this evening, even as the White House tells us he'll reiterate a 2 to 3 week process here in getting out of Iran.
Yeah, an official telling Bloomberg on background that he's going to reiterate this 2 to 3 week timeline, give an operational update. In other words, Joe, we may not get anything materially new or different in this address from the White House this evening, even as we are getting the president posting on True Social today the idea that Iran has asked for a ceasefire, and he will think about it if the Strait of Hormuz opens up. Of course, Iran pushes back on the notion that such a request was made.
Suggesting that is fake news. It's going to be interesting to hear from the president, and we'll let you know that they have told reporters to stand by around the president's Easter lunch today. He might actually take some questions because earlier made history by stopping by the Supreme Court, Kayla, to witness opening arguments, in this case about birthright citizenship. He's got a busy day today. It's going to be a long one.
Yeah, certainly there is a lot going on in him. He's not just weighing in on the Supreme Court of the United States or on geopolitics. He also just took to True Social to say that he's going to have Congress on a partisan basis, Republican only, bypassing the filibuster, pass funding for ICE and CBP. I assume the president is referencing another reconciliation package in this True Social post, Joe, and he says he wants it on his desk by June 1st.
Bypass the filibuster. Of course, he needs to drop the budget at some point as well, which we're all ears on. And I'll tell you, this is a huge day for politics and, of course, for American history. As the Artemis II launch is set for this evening, we could have 4 Americans on their way to the moon for the first time since the Apollo era. Before the president even speaks this evening, we've got a lot to talk about with the former vice president, don't we?
Indeed we do. Mike Pence will be here in just a moment with us in our Washington, D.C. studio. But first, we head up to New York headquarters to check on these markets as the second quarter opens. And Charles Pellet has a look for us. Hey, Charlie.
Thank you very much. And here's what's going on. You guys summed it up nicely. The essence of what's going on today, optimism about hopes that the war in the Middle East may be nearing a conclusion. Now the S&P Nasdaq advancing is around the GIB screen on the Bloomberg. Just about the best level of the day right now on the S&P. The S&P, by the way, 6602 where we stand now, up 74. That is a gain of 1.1%. The Dow up 413 points, up
2 to 3 more weeks?
I have one goal. They will have no nuclear weapon. And that goal has been attained. They will not have nuclear weapons. But we're finishing the job. And I think within maybe 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days longer to do the job. But we want to now get every single thing there. Now it's possible we'll make a deal before then.
And maybe he will be speaking about a deal this evening. There's so much we don't know about this address that we will bring you live, of course, here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Again, it's at 9 p.m. Eastern, so the president will be getting in living rooms across the country in a fairly rare primetime address. Will he talk about troops? Will he talk about withdrawal? Is the market optimism justified? Just some of the questions that we have for the former vice president. I'm glad to say Mike Pence is with us, as promised, former vice president of the United States and founder of Advancing American Freedom. Mr. Vice President, welcome back. It's great to see you.
Thank you. Good to be back.
What's your anticipation, your expectation for what the president might say this evening? And are you worried that the U.S. could leave the region with the Strait of Hormuz still closed?
Well, first let me say, I think every American should be proud of the extraordinary work our men and women in uniform have done over the last month. Taking the fight directly to the leading state sponsor of terrorism in the world. Iran has been a source of violence and mayhem, has claimed American lives, lives of our allies, and some its malign influence across the region for 47 years. So I'm proud of our troops. I'm also proud that President Trump pulled the trigger and made the decision to move against Iran. Simply cannot allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon, but to be able to hit the regime and simply say that the time of the sowing terror across the region over, I think was action whose time has come. But I will tell you, I'm pleased the president's taking his message directly to the American people in prime time tonight. Not that the administration has been shy about explaining their rationale for the war, but I think I'm sitting behind the desk in the Oval Office as I was present for the president to do a number of times. I think sends a message to the American people about our resolve, our support for our troops. I expect he'll speak favorably about this mission. And he'll update the American people on our progress. But I also expect there will be a call out to our allies around the world about the need to come alongside America and make sure that we finish this job and just open the Strait of Hormuz, that will make clear that the free world will no longer tolerate the violence and terror that has flowed from Tehran for 47 years.
On that call out to our allies, Mr. Vice President, making the ask now versus giving them a warning and making the ask before these operations began, why would they answer the call at this time?
Well, because they're our allies, clearly. And I'm particularly disappointed in the United Kingdom. And really, since World War II, we've had what we call a special relationship with the United Kingdom, which, as I said, of course, as a Prime Minister and as Vice President, that when we go, the UK goes, but not this time. And I think Keir Starmer has fumbled in ways that are not reflective of the deep and abiding ties between the American people and the people of the UK. That being said, there have been other allies that have stood with us over
deterrence on the world stage. Look, Beijing and Moscow are watching this conflict very closely. And if we were to stop short, if we were to take anything less than really a fundamental change in Iran and its ability to project force against others and its own people, I think that would really embolden authoritarian regimes around the world.
Even if it necessitates spring troops.
I don't believe it will. At the end of the day, I think allowing this regime, a terrorist regime, to retain power even with no faces would imperil America's interest, imperil Israel, and I think ultimately be a disservice to the lives that have been lost in the last month and to all those that have been lost over the last 47 years. Look, as I said, I'm incredibly proud of the armed forces and the job that they've done. I'm proud of the president for pulling the trigger. I think it's essential that we finish the job once and for all. And I'm hoping to hear that from the commander-in-chief tonight.
When you think back to the first term and the conversations you had with the president, I'm just wondering if this was one that you were actively having then. Were there battle plans to deal with Iran at that point? And if that's the case, why didn't you decide to go in?
see this happening again is so exciting for our community. It's great for our economy, but it's great for America. Coming together, saying to wish these astronauts the best. They go around the moon for the first time since 1972. And as you've driven around this community, you've seen this, not just NASA, but commercial space emerging here as well.
That's what I allude to, Congressman. You know, in your constituents, you have engineers, scientists that have been directly involved in this program. Is there any assessment you've done on the economic impact that something like the Artemis program has on the local economy here?
Well, it's a tremendous boom. As we like to say, it's literally taking off. And all the jobs that come, not just from the big companies, but the small suppliers as well. So many of us were concerned about what would happen to the space industry